Today's lesson is about CORS and token authentication. CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. And what's that all about? Well, let us just open up Paint here. And I'll explain. There is a problem with the security model that JavaScript has. And the problem is this. If you have a server here, let us say the address of this server is xyz.ca. Okay? And we have a page here. A page that's being served from this website. Okay, so we're serving a page from this website. And this could be something like, let me sort of write this here. It could be index.html that's being served from this website. Okay? And this particular page, it may be requesting, it may have some sort of a JavaScript that's requesting another server. It could be requesting another server, for example, that could be abc.ca, for example. Okay? Now, there is a security catch, you could say, in JavaScript, that if a page is being requested from a certain domain, and that page contains some JavaScript that is trying to do something else from another domain, it will refuse to do it. And this is called CORS, Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. The way around it is this site should allow for CORS. It should say, okay, I'm fine by that. That you can come to me even though your page is requested from another domain. Okay? So, let us see this in practical terms. We're going to start first by looking at a web API application that was written in ASP.NET. And I'll just run this to see what we've got. This is something that was pre-baked. We have this site, and it's got a service to do with patients in a clinic scenario. And so we have these patients. Now, let's see if I can access this page from another domain. To simulate another domain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to this project another web application. So I'll go add new project, and I'm going to choose web, and this one I'll just call it the CORS client. Okay? And I'll choose an empty website. In this application, I'm going to add an HTML page. This HTML page will just be called index.html. Here, I'm going to call it index.html. Now to this page, I've got some code that I'm just going to plug in, and this is some pre-baked code, which I'm going to explain in a moment. If you look at this code, it's got a button, and the idea of this button is btn get patients. And I've got some jQuery code here. Now, in order for me to use jQuery code, I need to have some jQuery in this in the client application. So to add jQuery to the client application, I'm going to go to Manage NuGet Packages and search for jQuery, which is here, and I'm going to install that. Okay, so now we have jQuery. Can close this, and I do need one of these jQuery files. So I'm going to drag and drop one of these and put them here. In the wrong place, so they should go up here. Okay, so now this should run. Again, back to the code. When this button is clicked, there's some jQuery code here, and when that button is clicked, it's going to call the getPatients function, which is this one up here. And this getPatients function is going to go against this URL and make a request for the patient's API. Now that particular URL, we need to adjust this port number. So let me run the main application again. So it is this that I'm looking for, this port number 62655. I'll replace that with 62655. Okay. So now, if I want to run this client index.html, I can right click on here and say View in Browser. And here it is. So this is the interface I'm getting. Let me click on getPatients. When I click on getPatients, I get an error. Let's go back to the code. When I call the getPatients method, it uses a jQuery get request to go against this URL, and when it's finished, it's going to call the show response function. And here there's a show response function. This show response function takes the result that comes from the server, it stringifies it, which means that it sort of turns it into a string. It's like a two-string method, and then it outputs that string inside of this element here, pre-output. That's just a pre-element in HTML. So what we're getting at the moment is an error. So to find out why we're getting this error, we can hit F12, okay, and go back to the console, and here is the error. The error is telling us head access control allow origin header is present on the request resource. In other words, access is denied because we're going across domains. Why are we going across domains? You can see that index.html is being served from port 60337. Our website where the request for patients is being asked is 62655. They're two different port numbers. This is the serving domain, and this is another domain where a service is being requested, and that's not allowed. So we get an error. So how do we solve this? We have to go to the service site, which in this case is the web API site, and in there we say enable CORS. To enable CORS on the service application, I have to come to this Clinic API and add a NuGet package. Manage NuGet packages. And in here I'm going to click on Browse and type in CORS for CORS. It's going to come up with this, Microsoft ASP.NET Web API CORS. I should install this. Oh, okay. I accept. So now it's installing that. The next step is to go in the Web API under Start, there's this Web API config. And over here, right at the spot, we have to say config dot enable CORS. This enables CORS in the entire application. But that's not enough, because we have to go to the particular controller that's serving this particular service and specify some parameters on how that CORS is going to be enabled. If I go back to the controller that I've been working with, this is the patient's controller over here. At the patient's controller level, there's another attribute that I should add here called enable CORS, and then it takes 3 arguments. This I have to resolve. So it has to import system, web, HTTP CORS. And this takes 3 arguments. So if I just open this bracket here, you will see that it takes 3 arguments. The first argument is origins. This means that I can specify here, these are the 3 arguments. This first one, origins, means that I can specify which IP addresses I'm allowing my service to be consumed from. If I have a partner organization there and I know their IP address, I can enter their IP address and say only they can consume my service and nobody else. Then you have here headers. The second argument, headers. What does that mean? It means that I may require that there are certain things that have to be present in the header, the HTTP header, that makes the request to my service. That could be potentially a password, a token, some sort of a GUID, or whatever you might want it to be. And the third thing is the methods. What sort of methods am I accepting? And by methods we mean the verbs, the HTTP verbs, the get, the post, the put, and the delete. So in my case, I'm going to do this. For the origins, I'm going to say I accept all origins. For the headers, I'm going to accept all headers. And for the verbs or the methods, I'm going to say I'm going to only accept get. Okay? So now let's compile. Now we can go to our client again, which is this here. Let's refresh. And now let's say get patients. And it works. So we got around this cross-origin resource scripting. Now let's look at one more element to this. Suppose I go now to my patient's controller and I say authorize. In other words, I want the user to authenticate before they can use my service. And this is a very normal scenario, especially if you're dealing with mobile devices. Mobile devices, they can access free services, but sometimes the services that they can access, you have to authorize. You have to be authenticated. Some such services are, for example, meetup.com. If you want to go to meetup.com, they have APIs, but you just can't go there and use their APIs without authenticating. So let's try this now. Let's compile and run our client application. But before we actually run our client application, let's go back to the actual service. And in our actual service, we notice that there are no buttons here on the right-hand side that you can click on to create a user. We actually have no users here. There is no user. If we want to create a user in this particular case, we have to create a user through APIs. Now, if you look at this button here, the API button, it will show you some of the services that we have. In fact, we can even go to Swagger to find that out. But I'm clicking this for the moment, and let's have a look. These are the services, the account controller services. So you can see here that if we want to register, let's click on register here. If you want to register, you need to pass the email, the password, and the confirm password. These are 3 required fields that have to be sent to the server. And with these, you can register, right? So, back to this. If I refresh and I click on get patients, this is expected. This is what we get from the server. Authorization has been denied for this request. In other words, I need to log in. But at the moment, how can I log in if I don't even have a user on the system? So, to create a user, we're going to add some more snippets here. I'm going to add a form to my HTML page. So let me go to my HTML page down here in the client application. And just before the button here, I'll add a form. And you can see what's on this form. I want to capture the email, the password, and the confirm password. Now let me add some code to handle the button register event. So I have some code for that too, which is this code here. I'll put that down here. So when the register button is clicked, it's going to call this register function. And the register function is going to go to this URL and pass it the data that was entered in the form serialized as a JSON object. Let's adjust the URL here. So to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to say let base URL equals to this here. And I'll delete this and just add base URL to this. It comes to the same. And down here, I'll also add base URL to this. Now, we're trying to register. Let's see if we can. So I'm going to go back to this HTML page, refresh it. And now I have a form. And this form, the purpose of this form is to be able to register. So let me register with this account, a@a.a, with password. And let's click on register. It's thinking, and most likely it's not going to work. Didn't get any errors yet. But let's go to F12 here and see maybe there's a problem. Unexpected token line 23. Maybe I have an error. Oh, I made an error. My fault. So let's go back to the code and base URL. I didn't start it with a quotation here. So there's an error. Let's start again. Go back here. Close this. Refresh. and do it again. Register. Okay, this is expected. Error. This is very similar to the first error we saw. And how did we fix that? The first error we saw when we tried to get data from the patient's controller and CORS was not enabled. So now we have to also enable CORS in the account controller, which means if we go now to the accounts controller on the service, we have to enable CORS right here too. Otherwise it won't allow it. So if I come here and I say enable CORS, okay, let us resolve this. And I'll just do everything here. Star for the origins, star for the headers, and let's say star. We could just say post, because we just want to post. But I'm just gonna say star and build. Now that it has built, we can go to the client again, refresh, and try to create a user again. Register. It may take a little bit longer because if it is actually working, it has to create a database. Here it says that this account has already been taken. Okay, let me try another one. Maybe that account existed before. So let me change this to b at b.b and register again. Now when we get nothing, this apparently is a good thing. Why? Because if you go to the actual account controller and you look at the register method, if you have a successful registration, all it does is return OK. So we were able to register. Now the next step is we want to log in. So I've got some code snippets for that. But the thing about logging in is the controller that it goes against. There is a login controller. And the controller that's responsible for logging in is not the account controller. The account controller doesn't do login. All it does is it does registrations. It could do logouts, but the login controller, it has more of a responsibility than just taking your username and password, because it creates tokens and it manages tokens, and it has to be treated just like any other controller. Now that controller that is responsible for managing tokens is this one here, application open auth provider. It's right in here under the providers folder. So if I double click on this, it's got this important method called grant resource owner credentials, which is this here. Okay. At the bottom of this method, I have some snippets of code that I want to put. This code here. Now, what is this code saying? This code is telling this particular controller that you have to allow CORS. It's sending a header information to allow CORS. So I'm going to compile this. Now, what about logging in? I have some code here for creating the login form. So I'm going to copy this and come into my HTML and add a login form. And if you look at the login form, what am I capturing? I'm capturing the username, the password, and I have a login button. So the next step is, how do I handle that login button? So here's my code for handling the login button. I'm going to put it down here. So when the login button is clicked, it's going to call this login function. And this login function is going to go against a token controller. Now, we don't really have a token controller. The token controller is really this file that I opened for you earlier on. That is my token controller, which is this here. In Solution Explorer, the last thing I opened was this application Open Auth Provider. This is the destination that it's going to go to, because you have to log in there and you're given a token. This kind of authentication is very different from session authentication. With session authentication, which is really a very, very web type of authentication, it only works for websites. But if you want to consume a service using a mobile device or an Angular 2 code, you need token authentication. So this location, it provides you with a login capability, and it gives you tokens. So let's take this base URL and add it to this. So going back here, you're going to go to the token destination here. You're going to take the data that was received on the form, serialize it, and pass it to this URL using a post method. Now, in addition to that, you're going to pass this grant type equals to password. To better understand this, let us use Postman. Let's go to Postman here. I'm going to start this up. Okay, so let me go against this URL. So the URL I want to go against is on port number 62655. So I want to go to 62655/token. Okay, and I want to use the post method, and I'm going to use this form URL encoded format, and this is the URL I want to go against. I want the whole objective here is to log in. In order to log in, let us actually enter these key value pairs. The key value pair I have here from the form is username. I want to pass username. And the username is, we've got an a@a.a. And we also have a password. And it is this password. And yet, there's yet another key that I need to pass. And you can see from this form, the login form, I have to pass grant type equals to password. This is necessary. So I'm going to enter here grant type equals to password. And that's it. Let me send this. Okay, it did come back. And this is very interesting. What did it do? It came back with a token. This is my ticket to interact with the service. Whenever I make a request to the service, I have to pass this token. So let me take this token it goes up to here. I'm going to take this token and park it in Notepad. Okay. Now, if I want to make a request for my patients, I have to pass this token. Let's do that in Postman. So to make a GET request to this site, and particularly the patient's controller, I have to pass the token. So for header, there is a particular header that I need to pass. And I'm just going to confirm it from my snippets here. It's called Authorization. So back here, okay, so we need to pass a header. And in that header information, we need to pass the token. Otherwise, we won't get a response from the server, or it won't serve our request. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete this header, and there is a token called Authorization, and you have to paste the token inside of the value, but that token has to be preceded by the word bearer space, and then you take the token, which I parked here, copy the whole thing, and add it here. And now this has to be a GET request. Okay, so we make a GET request to patients. Authorization is the key for the header, and bearer followed by a space, then the token. Let's go send. You see, I got the response. So what did I do? When I logged in, I got a token. Then I use that token whenever I want to communicate with the server, and the server checks that it's the right token. Let us simulate this in our application. So the last thing we did was we were able to get a token and run this again. And let's log in. a@a.a and the password. So now we get a token. Let us now pass that token in our request. What I'll do now is I've got some more snippets here. I don't need this anymore. Don't save this. And let me go back here. Now to add logic for saving the token, I'm going to add this variable at the top here. So I'm creating my own variable just to store the token. And I'm going to replace my login function with a different login function, because this previous login function, it was not saving a token. So I'm going to comment this out and add a new login function that's going to go against the same destination. What is this? Sorry, base URL. Let me just say base URL plus. Is it the same? Yes. So it's going to go against the same destination, and then when it successfully logs in, it's going to call a function called save access token. Where is the save access token? Here is this function. It's going to just save the token into a local variable, as you can see here. The data comes to this function. It's going to strip out the access token, save it locally, so that we can use it later on. And then I need another function here to construct the header information. So let me paste this here. This simply constructs the header information. It's a function called getHeaders. If the access token exists, it's going to construct this header. You remember we had a header with key authorization followed by a value bearer and a space followed by the token. That's what we're constructing here. The next thing is to call the get patients. Actually, it should be get patients. Let me just copy this. I'm going to replace this. I had previously a get patients method or function. I'm going to comment this out and replace it with this. This one we're going to call it get patients. The URL will be patients. It's going to use this AJAX function of jQuery. It's going to make a GET request, and as far as the headers are concerned, it's going to grab the headers from our function, so it has the right header. And it's going to make an AJAX request to this URL. And when it's done, it's going to show response. Okay? So let's run this and see if it's going to work. I think that's all I needed to do. Go back here, refresh the page. So I'm getting now the token. And maybe I have an error somewhere. Let's go function F12. So I have an error. Success is not a function. Okay, so now let's log in. A at A.A. And we have our token. Now if I click on get patients, I get my patients because it passes the tokens. So that's the climax. Thank you very much.